So this is going to be an overview of the Artisan Pro panel. So what I'm not going to do today is to go into all the features of the panel, because for that we already have the various recorded webinars. So if you want to know more about the specific feature and how to use it, then there's a multitude of recorded webinars on my YouTube channel. So please go there. So basically, this is mostly meant for the people who are already using Artisan Pro Panel to get a sort of refresher, and at the same time to emphasize the features that I think most people are not using while they are very, very useful and valuable. So I want to focus on that. I also want to focus on my recommended workflow. And furthermore, for the people who are not using the panel just yet, and that surprised me actually, because I saw a lot of people who didn't use the panel just yet. So this is not going to be a sales pitch for all of you who don't have the panel just yet. I just hope that if you see me doing the demonstration and the overview of the features, that you are convinced that this, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is one of the best black and white software there is available right now. So 13 years ago, I was one of the global ambassadors of Nix Software Self-Effects Pro 2, and back then it was one of the best black and white software there was available. Still, there were a few things in there that I thought the software could use, and basically what I've been trying to do ever since is to develop my own software with all the missing elements that I found were very important and very valuable to also be in this software. So that's one of the reasons that I developed the Artisan Pro software. On top of that, I wanted to have something that combined all the important elements and features that a good black and white software needs, to put them all together so I can use them in a very fast and effective way. Of course, you can do all of this using the Adobe Photoshop. But the thing is that you have to know how to do it, of course. You have to know all the sequences, all the steps. And that's what I've been trying to automate into this panel, so that it all becomes not only faster, but also more efficient, but also more consistent. That's something that's really important, that there needs to be a specific kind of consistency, a consistency in subtlety, and in how you apply a specific kind of adjustments. So let me try to show you that with the short demonstrations. I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so for example, if you look at this, as you all know, there are a few principles, and well, I hope that most of you know that there are a few important principles in good black and white photography, and one of them is that you need to be able to create depth, meaning you have to have the right kind of light to dark or dark to light transitions. And usually, if you do that with the gradient tool, then you would have something like, let me go here, would have something like this. Okay, so what the panel can do is to make that gradient very consistent. So if I would go here and I would do something like bottom to top, you see that this is a very consistent kind of gradient from light to dark. I can do it again and we'll apply the same kind of gradient, exact the same kind of gradient. But not only that, it is also very subtle. You see, it's never a very harsh transition, because if you would do this manually, then you would usually end up with something like this. You see that you really have to guess and to be very proficient with the gradient tool to come up with the right kind of transition from dark to light in this case. And not only that, it is also important to have this consistency in the gradients. So this is one of the reasons that I developed the panel. So let me try to show you what the panel can do, and let me show you the most important features. So this is a photo that was provided to me by Leonard Cox. He's also one of the attendees in this webinar. So I'm going to be using this photo. It's a very beautiful photo. I've already created the hard mask, so I'm not going to be demonstrating how to create a hard mask, because that is something for a different kind of webinar. I've also created all the luminosity masks in here. Okay, so basically, if you look at the panel, if you look at the top section of the panel, then you see all the shortcuts to existing Photoshop features. So this is nothing special. They are just there to make life just a little bit easier. Okay, the most important things are in here under tools, conversions, adjustments, colors, and depth. Okay, so let me try to explain the most important features. So the tools are essentially the Pro tools, meaning that most of the menu items that you see here, they are Pro Adjustment tools, meaning that for most of them, you have to do them manually, meaning you also have to create the duplicate layers manually. While for all the other menu items and features, the layers are always automatically generated and created once you apply an adjustment. This is my favorite section in the panel because this gives me the most control. So I'll be going into this in more detail later on. But here you have the luminosity mask. So you just click on one of those luminosity masks to create the lights, for example. You have the full values, the half values, and the quarter values. And the same for the darks and the mids. So I'm not going to explain how to use luminosity masks. For that, I have several different recorded webinars, also on my YouTube channel. But you can easily create them here. So in this case, I've already created the quarter values. All right. And you can easily get rid of them just by clicking on this. And by the way, if you want to create luminosity masks, always do them from the original color layer. Okay, so in this case, from this background layer. Never create them from one of the final adjustment layers. So these are the luminosity masks. The Pro adjustments is something that I use well, most of the time. And it also has this kind of feature, the auto blending. This is a very important feature that I think most people are not even aware of, that you can use it. But it's a very handy and very important feature. So I'll be going into this later on. This section is usually only used for creating masks, while this is for creating the adjustments in your black and white photo or color photograph for that matter. Then you have the sky mask, and this basically takes the AI sky selection feature of Photoshop and applies a few more adjustments to make the mask even better. So it's a very basic kind of feature. And I think the sky mask is one of the most important masks that most of people who are into black and white or color photography would need. There's also optimizations. I'm not going to be using this today. This is just an added feature with which you can upscale your image, add noise, and do some sharpening, but also to optimize your mask. So this I'm not going to use today. Just look at one of the webinars, recorded webinars, and you will find more information about that. We also have the conversions section. Okay, I think this speaks for itself. So you have the black and white conversions. You also have the styles. This is something that is there just to play with. It is something that I wouldn't use myself, but I think there are plenty of people out there who like to use the style section just to come up with some artistic ideas if you are lacking some good ideas. So this is something that I'm not going to use today, just this. So let's have a closer look at the black and white conversions. Usually I would only use the neutral black and white conversion. And there you also have the low key, high key, etc. You also have the more advanced conversions, but this is something that I would use most of the time. Also, I've added something called the black and white color filters. So basically this is emulating a color filter in front of your camera. So what you can get if you, for example, click on the red filter is you will create a black and white conversion. with in this case, a darker sky, because the sky is a little bit blue, and you know that if you use a red filter, then you'll get a sort of darker sky. You also have for example, the blue filter. Then you will end up with something like this. So I can tell you that in the past, I was quite a purist. I didn't like any conversions or adjustments that were depending on the original color information. Because if you do that, then basically it's always interpolated information if you use the original color information. Because as you know, the color information is always derived from the Bayer filter that's on top of the original sensor. It's a technical story, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. But it's basically interpolated information, and I always try to avoid interpolation. But these days, the algorithms to create the color in a color photograph are so good that I really don't mind that at all anymore. So that's one of the reasons that I added the black and white color filters. And from all those color filters, the blue filter is the one that I use a lot of the times. And you can see why. If you do use the blue color filter, you see that there's plenty of contrast there between the figure and its ground. While if you look here, the red color filter is a completely different kind of look. It also looks good, but I prefer to use the blue color filter. Okay, but that's just a personal preference. Okay, so black and white conversions, neutral, and one of those color filters are always a good starting point. All right. Now, let's have a look at the adjustments. Basically, from the adjustments, I always like to use the global adjustments. So, by the way, don't worry, I'm going to go through all the features again in more detail, the ones that I use most of the times, but now just a quick overview, okay, of the most important features. So from the adjustments, I like to use the global adjustments as a second step. And of those, I like to use this one, the contrast. So this is the global contrast, and especially the low key, the mid key, or the high key. This I don't use. This is just to enhance the contrast on both sides of the histogram. So meaning you will get darker tones and lighter tones. So you are basically increasing the overall contrast. That's something that I don't like to do. But I like to use this one, the low key and the mid key, because what this does is to not only darken the photograph, but also removes the contrast. Okay, I'll get into that also later on, because it's a very important principle within my workflow. So this is something that I would use most of the times. You can also use one of those. You have to just play with it. It's something that I don't use. Apart from the global adjustments under the adjustment section, I also like to use this one, the Microne Adjustment. So the thing is that I like to use this one, the tools, with the Pro Adjustments and the luminosity mask. So here, like I said, you have to do everything manually. So you have to create the adjustment layers manually, but not only that, you have to analyze the luminosity mask manually and then combine them also manually with the hard mask. Here, the Microne adjustments will do that all automatically. So it's basically the same principle, but here it's done automatically. I prefer the Pro tools here with the luminosity mask because it gives me more control. But if you're not comfortable with analyzing luminosity mask or not comfortable with all the manual adjustments, then I can recommend this one, the Microne adjustment. Okay, so you can also turn on the zone preview. So for example, if you set this to zone 0, okay, then if you go over here, you will see what parts of the image are in zone 0. If you click on, let's say, zone 4, dark midtones, you go over here, you will see what parts are in zone 4. Okay, so this is something that a lot of people also do not use. I can highly recommend it if you're not very comfortable with the luminosity mask and with all the manual adjustments. So this is then a very good section to use. I'm not going to be using this today. I'm going to be using the Pro Tools because it gives me more control, and you will see why when I do all the demonstrations. So adjustments, the global adjustments and the microzone adjustments, they are the most important features under the adjustments section. Then the next one is the creating depth panel or section. Okay, here you can create all the gradients, the dark to light or light to dark transitions. And you see here what it can do. So you also have the reflections, you also have the diagonals. So whatever you like. And it's a very consistent kind of way of creating transition from dark to light and light to dark. And it's always very subtle. Okay, it's never abrupt. Well, if you look here, okay, then you can, if you have selected, let's say, something like this, you can, let me just get rid of those layers for now. Okay, so here, if you darken, then of course you will go from bottom to top and you will darken it. Let's go from top to bottom, in this case. I'm just gonna darken it. So top to bottom darken. So the bars that you see here, so these are 3 bars, 4 bars, and this I think it's, well, sorry, this is 2, 3, 4. So basically they indicate the range. Okay, so if you use this one with the 2 bars, then it's just a range of something like 30%, while the 3 bars have a range of something like 50%, and the one with the 4 bars have a range of 75%, something like that. So let me use that. And also this, let's not forget that, this is the strength of the darkening. So strength of 1 is just, well, it's not so very dark, of course. This is something that I would use most of the times. That's strength of 2. You also have 3 and 4. I wouldn't use that because they are really, really too strong to my taste. Well, you can use the 3, but I wouldn't go with 4. So 2 or 3 are the ones that I would use most of the times. So let's use a strength of 2 and go from top to bottom and darkening it. And you will see that it will darken from top to bottom. Okay. Then you can do the same with the lightning. Okay, so you can lighten all those things. Let me do that too. Let's go from bottom to top. And let's do a 3 and go with a medium coverage. Okay, let's do it again. And you will see that it goes lighter and lighter. And you can also use this one with the larger range, and you have something like that. Okay, so it's very easy to use. It's always consistent. It's always the same kind of darkening or lightening. It's always the same kind of distance that will cover. So it's so that is very important when you are working on creating depth in your photograph. This is a very, very important feature in my panel. It's something that I use all the time. I cannot do my photographs without using the restore. Okay, I will show you that later on, but this perhaps is the single most important feature in the panel. And it is, you know, I always find it strange when I look at all the other software, bigger software manufacturers, that they still don't have something that resembles the restore feature. Because, you know, this is something that gives you so much control over everything that I find it hard to work on a black and white or color photograph without using the restore feature. Okay, so this is something that I will show you plenty of times today. So that's the creating depth. You can also do this. There's also special effects. So this is basically something that I would only use if I want to create depth. So let's say a light, dark light, or reflection, and a very intricate kind of detail, like cables of a bridge, for example, or antennas, that kind of smaller details that are hard to control and to isolate if you are using the normal kind of gradient tool. So special effects is something that I won't be using today, but there's a recorded webinar as well on YouTube in which I use the special effects. And it's very, very handy. Okay, so those are the most important features. There's also this one. So if you like to create a split tone, and this is something that I like to use quite a bit. Well, there are different kinds of tonings. Okay, split tone cinematic based on some movies, well-known movies. There's also split tone music, and of those, I like to use Into the Mystic and Lowdown. They are always very, very subtle kind of split tones. So let me try to show you that. So for example, if I use this on a color photograph, you can also use that on a color photograph. You're sort of creating a color grading. Let me click on that. So you can use it on black and white, on the final black and white version, or on a color photo as well. And you can move the intensity slider like so, and you have something that looks like this. Okay, so you can see that there's a completely different kind of look right now. So this is something that I can really recommend if you are in the finishing, touching phase of your photograph. This can help you make your photo even more interesting. There's also color grading. So this is actually meant for color photographs. The same principle as the split toning, only in this case I'm using multiple zones in a photo to create the color grading. While in split toning, I'm only using 3 zones. That is the shadow area, the midtone, and the highlights. Here I'm using the entire range between shadows and highlights. Okay, this is something that you have to play with. It's a very fun kind of feature, I think, but not so very important. All right, so let me go in here. Now I'm gonna go into the more detailed demonstration of this panel. Okay, so up till now, are there any questions before I go into the first demo using the panel? If you already have some questions, please state them right now. I don't think there are any questions already, or are there? Okay, you know what? I'm just going to go through the next part with the demonstration. So that was a quick overview. Okay, before I go into the demonstration, I just want to say the following. It is not an easy panel to use, but I created this panel as a sort of educational tool to get to know the panel very well, to be using the panel in a very good and proficient way. You need to know about about specific principles of a good black and white photography. So basically, this panel forces you to get to know the most important principles of good black and white photography. If you don't know them, then it's going to be really difficult to be using the panel. So about what kind of principles am I talking about? So first of all, you have the figure ground principle. Okay, so this is something that you need to know before you can use the panel in a very good and proficient way. So I'm not going to explain this, but the thing is that you have to separate the figure from the ground. And the figure is the part in your photograph that is the most important object. And that part, that figure, needs to have the most important details, most important contrast, most important selective contrast, the brightest light, etc. While the ground is merely plays a supporting role in the photograph. Apart from that, there are also other kinds of principles. Let me show you a few. So this one, selective tonal contrast. So this is always very important in my workflow. The eyes are always drawn to the element with the highest tonal contrast and brightest light, so to the figure. Well, this is very important in my workflow. And basically, all the features that I've created in the panel are focused on enabling this principle, okay, to support this principle. There are some other important principles in there, but let me focus on this one, dimensional depth perception. So creating presence is a very important part of my workflow as well. So you need to be able to create a sense of perception of dimensional depth that's created by solid transition from dark to light and vice versa. And on top of that, defining edges and emphasizing that. Okay, so those are I think the most important principles in my workflow. There are other important principles, but this is something that you will always see in my workflow. And the panel is basically built around those principles and a few other principles. So basically, to be able to use this panel, you have to know about these principles and what they stand for. Because I never abandon those principles. There's always selective contrast in my photo. There's always a figure and a ground. There's always going to be dimensional depth perception. Those three elements are always there in my photographs, and they should be there in any kind of photograph. Whether you're a black and white photographer or not, they should be there. You should be aware of those. That's why I basically built this panel, and it evolved into something more complex than that. So that's why there's a specific kind of steep learning curve, because this is something that you need to know and need to be aware of to be able to use a panel in a very efficient and proficient way. Let me show you this as well, and then we go into the demonstration. So there's a specific kind of workflow. So all the people who are familiar with my workflow, who are always attending my webinars, already know about this, but especially for the people who are not familiar with the kind of work that I do and with the panel, let me show you this. There's always a very specific kind of workflow. Okay, first of all, if you look at number one, you have to determine the figure and the ground. So make that analysis, the figure ground analysis. Then you go into the creation of the selections or the hard mask. So you have to isolate the figure from the ground. You don't have to, but then you have less control. So if you want to have more control over every element in your photo, you have to create the hard mask. So isolate figure from ground. What I do then as a next step is to lower the contrast or remove the contrast in the ground or in the figure. It depends a little bit on the situation. And sometimes I do both at the same time. So sometimes I do this lower contrast in ground, a lower contrast in figure at the same time. But usually I would start with lowering or removing the contrast in the ground and at the same time darkening or lightening it. Okay, and then I go to the figure, and then I bring back all the details that I want to bring back to my figure. Okay, and then if necessary, I would also bring back some details in the ground. And I also create depth per plane, especially in architectural photography. You will see that you have a multitude of planes that you need to treat separately. In landscapes, there are usually just 2 or 3 planes, like the sky, the foreground, and a specific element in your landscape photograph. But architectural photography usually has, well, at least in my case, 5 to 10, sometimes 20 different kind of planes. And you have to treat every plane differently in terms of creating depth. Okay, and this is something that you can do in between here as well. So this is set as number 10, but basically you can do it after number 4 or after number 8 or 6 or 5, doesn't matter. It's just that I needed to give it a place. Okay, so this is basically my workflow, the outline of my workflow, and the overview of my workflow. All right. Okay, so we're back here with Leonard Cox's photograph of a beautiful landscape. Okay, so I've already created the hard mask. Okay, you see that here. I have a hard mask of the sky, and I also have a hard mask of the figures. Okay, and I've also already created the luminosity mask, just the lights, and I will be using them as well. And in this case, I only created the quarter values over here. If you want to, you can also start with the full values or half values. It's just that there's a specific kind of granularity with the quarter values that gives me good or better starting point than starting off with the lights. But that's just a personal preference. Okay, and for all the people who think that this is just a luminosity mask panel, it's way more than that. This goes beyond luminosity masks. Even though the luminosity masks play an important role in my panel, this is much more than just luminosity masks. It's basically just a bonus feature in the panel to make life a little bit easier. But it's not about luminosity masks, even though it plays a very important role in the panel. Okay, so I've created all those hard masks already, and I've basically done that with this, and then I inverted this mask, and then I came up with this. All right. So I've created those. I've created luminosity mask. So let's go with a conversion first, because after you've done that, the analysis, after you've done the masks, what you do next then is to do the conversion. Okay, so conversion is something else than adjustment. Okay, the conversion is just the transition from color to black and white without any adjustments. Because I've noticed if you look on the internet, people talk about conversions, they talk about everything that, even also including the adjustments. But in my book, that's not correct. Conversion is just the phase from color to black and white without any adjustments. So basically, that should be the neutral conversion, because that's an absolute neutral type of conversion that only removes the color without affecting the luminosity values or the luminance values of each pixel in this photograph. But like I said at the beginning, these days I like to use the black and white color filters. So in this case, I like to use the blue filter. Okay, and by the way, you can only use this on a color layer. So once you've done, let's say, a neutral conversion, then obviously you cannot use this anymore because it doesn't have any color information anymore. So it's completely useless. So it's either one of those normal conversions that you see here, like the absolute neutral, or one of the color filters, but you cannot use both. All right. So in this case, I like to use the blue filter. Okay, because it gives me a good starting point. All right, so this is the blue color filter that I like to use as a starting point. But if you like to use the red or the yellow or the dark red, feel free to do so. Just play with it. But don't use those two at the same time because that's quite useless. So after the conversion, you basically go to the adjustments. So then you will treat each plane, each part of the figure or the ground separately. For that, you need to have the hard mask. So if you have hard mask, you can control more. You have more control of the photo, so you end up with a better result. Basically, that's the rule of thumb. Okay, but it's not always possible to create hard masks. Sometimes you have to do it in a different kind of way, and I'll show you that because you can do that also in a different kind of way by just creating a random kind of mask, like one with the rectangular marquee tool, and then apply a specific adjustment in there, and then do the restore. So I'll show you that. Because if you look here, for example, the lake that you see here, if you want to create an accurate hard mask, well, then that is going to be quite a challenge. I would say it's actually quite impossible, and it's not very useful, I think. For that, we have different kind of tricks to handle that. Okay, so I've created the blue filter. So now what I'm going to do is to go to adjustments. So that is the second step after the conversion. And like I said, I like to use the global adjustment and then remove the contrast and then darken or lighten it. So why would I like to remove the contrast in a photograph? The thing is, I like to remove all the contrast because they are distracting. Just compare with the painter who likes to start off on a blank canvas. He doesn't start off on a pre-painted canvas because that would be completely distracting. And this is the same kind of principle. The flatter your image, the more neutral your canvas, the more the creative juices will flow, okay? Because then you can come up with something that's completely your own vision without being distracted by the already available contrasts that are there in the photograph. So that is one of the most important reasons that I like to remove the contrast and then darken or lighten it. In this case, I think I'm going to start off with a remove of the contrast in this part. So not in the sky, because the thing is the sky is already quite lacking in contrast. It's just a very flat sky. Okay, so I'm going to load the foreground, so the figure's feathered. Okay, now I'm going to click on this. And then I'll say, you know what, make it a little bit darker, make it even flatter. Okay, something like, well, that's maybe a little bit too dark. Something like that, 75%. So this is the intensity slider. Don't forget to click on apply or cancel, because if you don't do that, then all things can go wrong. So apply. All right, so here I went from this, which is quite high. Well, not very high in contrast, but higher in contrast than this. This is much flatter. It's also darker. So I've lowered the contrast. I darkened it also a little bit, but you can also lower the contrast and then make it high key if you want to. All right. In this case, I like to make it darker. All right. So now I have this. What can I do with the sky now? For now, I think I like to make it a little bit darker. So let's say with the gradient from top to bottom. So let me do that first and then see what we can end up with. And then I'm going to go to my figures again and bring back some details there. Okay, just following this kind of workflow. All right. Yeah, I'm going to load the sky. Go to depth, because here you have the depth creation features. I'm going to go from top to bottom. I'm going to use darken, so the full range. So it will go from here to here. This is the edge of the selection. Okay. So I'm going to go darken it and set the strength to 2. Okay. You see, it's very subtle, right? It's not a very harsh kind of adjustment, because I don't like that. I like to build up the adjustments almost organically. Okay, it should be a gradual kind of process. Okay, I can darken it even more, like so. All right, so you see now it's darkened there. And at the same time, I think I like to make this part a little bit lighter from bottom to top. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to switch over to bottom to top. And then let's go crazy with the strength of 3 and lighten like so. Maybe even more, like so. Okay, so I've done 2 iterations with the lighten. And then we have something like this. It's getting a little bit lighter on the sides as well. So what I'm going to do is to do a restore from left to right and from right to left, because here I think it also made it a little bit lighter. So I'm going to do a restore from left to right. Okay, a minute. I need to merge it down because it needs to be on top of the layer that is not affected by the light bottom to top light transition. A little bit from right to left. It's a subtle kind of change, but perhaps you can already see it that now this has been restored with the darker tones from the bottom layer. So now you see that if I turn this on and off, then you see that this is before and this is after, with the light added here just in the center, because I did a left to right and right to left restore. Okay, once again, before and after. Okay, this is a good starting point for now. I can change more in the sky later on, but for now I think I like this. So now I'm going to work on the figures on the foreground. do something with the lake, the grass, and the trees there. Okay, let me merge it down. And by the way, a lot of people have also asked me, why aren't you using adjustment layers? Why are you always merging down? And the reason for that is that typically my workflow, my photo consists of something like in total, well, hundreds of adjustments. So imagine that I would create an adjustment layer for each of those adjustments. I would end up with something like 2, 3, even 500 adjustment layers. There's no computer, at least not mine, that can deal with such a large file. Even if I have a very fast computer, and I have a very fast computer, after 20 layers, maybe 30 layers, then my computer is going to slow down and Photoshop is going to crash. Okay, so that is one of the reasons. There are more reasons, but that is one of the most important reasons. So I have this. Now I'm going to work on the foreground. So first thing that I want to do is to bring back some life into the lake. Okay, that it's a little bit flat. So I want to bring back some light, but also some darker tones in the lake. And like I said, I like to use the Pro Tools. So what I'm going to do is to use the Pro Tools. So first of all, I'm going to create manually duplicate layers with Command J or Control J. So there I have a new layer. Because again, but if you use the Pro Tools, you have to do everything manually. Okay, so what can I do more? Well, like I said, I like to bring back some details, some light, especially some light details into the lake. So I'm going to look at my luminosity mask. I'm going to evaluate them. If you want to know more about this, there are plenty of recorded webinars that go into the use of the luminosity mask and how to assess them and evaluate them. But for now, I'm just going to go with this. So if you look here, if I would use 275, then I think I would have quite a subtle kind of luminosity mask that I can use for my subtle adjustments to bring back the light there. If I would use 225, I think it would be too light. It would affect more of the lake. It would be too bright. So I prefer 275. But let's have a look at 325. I think I can also use this. Then the adjustments in light that I want to apply would only be, let's say, targeted at this specific section. So 275 or 325. I think I'm going to go with 325. If it's not enough light, I can always go back and do it again with 275. So I'm going to go with 325. All right. Okay, so this lake needs to be adjusted. So how do you do that? If you do not want to create a hard mask of the lake. So basically what you do is to create something like this with your marquee tool. Leave enough room here so you can do some restore, and here as well, and here. Well, that's not possible here, but here as well. So I have this, but I've also added the sky. So I'm going to subtract the sky. Okay, subtract it like so. Okay, now I have only the foreground selected, the figure selected. So now I'm going to save that. Save selection. It's just a temporary selection that I'm going to save because I'm going to remove it once I'm done with this. I'll call it temp 1. Okay. I've saved that. I've already created a new layer there. So what I'm going to do right now is to select the, what was it, 325 and intersect that. So basically what you do then is to load the luminosity mask, the soft mask, and load it only within this selection. So that's the idea behind intersection. You combine the hard mask with the soft mask within this targeted area only. So that's intersect. All right, so now it's intersected. You don't see the marching ants because they are too subtle to be seen. So now I go to Pro Adjustments. Like I said, this section is only there for the creation of hard masks. So I'm not going to go into that. So you have to be here, the selective adjustments. I'm not turning on the auto blending. I will show you later how to use that. But here, I'm using a rectangular marquee tool. So within a rectangle. So here I can use the restore. Okay, so this is turned off. So now I'm going to lighten it. I typically do 5 to 10 iterations. I think I'm close to 10 right now. All right. So this is before, this is after. Oh, sorry, this is after. Again, before, after. Okay, you see that there's, I brought back the details of the lake, maybe a little bit more. Just go a little bit more. Okay. You see that there are some strange edges there because of the rectangular marquee tool. So what I'm going to do right now is to load that temporary selection of the marquee tool, tab 1, like so. And then I'm going to go to depth and restore. So I'm going to restore from top to bottom, left to right, and bottom to top. I don't need to do that from right to left. So from top to bottom, okay, from left to right. I'll do it with a small range because it's just a small area there. Okay, and now also from bottom to top with a medium range. I typically use a range of 2 or 1. Very rarely I would use a 3 or a 4. But most of the times I would use 2. So basically everything, including strength, the range, the recommended setting is around 2 or 3. So from bottom to top. Okay. Now let me show you what I have here. So like I said, I've done the restore, and you don't see the transitions anymore, right? You just see the effect in the lake. Before, after. Okay, I can show you what the rectangle was again. So pay attention here. Of course, that transition, that edge is not visible anymore because it has been restored. So here, you can basically do anything in any kind of challenging section or plane or detail and apply light or darker tones or create contrast or create depth in a very controlled way. Again, before, after, sorry. Okay, I think it needs to have a little bit more light overall because I think that, okay, here, so that this is a little bit too light to my taste. It doesn't look strange, but it's a little bit too light to my taste. So I'm gonna do a restore from right to left as well. So I'm gonna load that again, tab 1. Let's say, okay, just a small one from right to left. Okay, now it's gone. It's not so light anymore. Okay, I just want to bring back a little bit more light into the lake. So I'm going to be using, instead of 325, I'm going to use 275. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use. So again, a new layer, Command J, Control J, load the temporary selection again. And now instead of 325, I'm going to use 275. A little bit more wide range. Okay, so intersect with selection. All right. Go back to tools. This one, Pro Adjustments, lighten. So without auto blending turned on. Again, typically 5 to 10 iterations. You can also do it in fewer iterations, but I always prefer to build it up gradually and in a more subtle kind of way. Okay, so this is after around 10 iterations. You see the edges more clearly now here. That's not a problem because now I'm going to do the restore. So go to depth again, do restore from bottom to top and left to right and top to bottom. So let's start with this from top to bottom. Okay, from right to left, sorry, from left to right. Okay, from bottom to top. And a small one from right to left. Let's get rid of that. So this is before, this is after. You see, there's more light in the lake. And so this is before, before I did the two cycles of iterations. So this is before. This is the end result. Again, before, end result. I've also added some light there. So maybe I should do another restore, a little bit wider range. So let me do that. Because I don't like that light over there. So instead of a small one, I do a larger one from right to left. Okay, now it's better. Again, before, after. All right. So I want to do more, and that is to, well, there's so much to do here in this photograph, but I'm just going to show you the most important features. So if you look here at the original color photograph, see those trees over there that have a lighter kind of appearance on luminance values, and I want to do something with that. Okay, I want to lighten up those trees basically. So how do you do that without creating crazy selections of those trees? Well, basically the same kind of way. So what I'm going to do first is to evaluate the luminosity mask to see what luminosity mask will isolate those trees. Okay, so let's start here. So if I use 225, you see that those trees, those red trees with the red colors, the lighter trees, are more or less isolated, right? This one, those ones, okay? So those are basically the trees that I had in mind, and I want to lighten those. Okay, so what I can do right now, so that was with 225. So what I can do right now is to say, okay, again, I can use this, the rectangular marquee tool, and say, all right, I'm going to select that, and then save that as a temporary channel, and then do the restores. So let me do that, and then give you an alternative way of going about it. So select, save selection, wallet temp number 2. All right, and I'm going to be using 225. Okay, so first of all, create a new layer, Command J or Control J. Now load that temp 2 selection. Okay, we have to get rid of the sky because I don't want to affect the sky. Subtract. All right, so the sky has been subtracted. And now I'm going to load that luminosity mask. I think it was 225. Yeah, 225. So load selection 225. Intersect that within the hard selection. Okay, it gives you this warning, just ignore it. It means that you don't see the marching ants. So just click OK. And I go again to tools. So you see that I always go back and forth between tools, depth, tools, depth. I only do this once, the conversions. I only do this also once, the adjustments. And then it's all about tools and depth. Okay. So let me do a lighted. Typically 10 iterations. Okay, let me do a little bit more, stronger. So I still want to demonstrate a lot of other things. Okay, so this before is after. You see the strange edge there. Okay, so now load temp 2. Temp 2, that is. Without the sky, so I'm going to subtract it already. Okay, now do a restore from left to right, bottom to top, right to left, and I think also from top to bottom. So go back to depth, do this, bottom to top, left to right, but not so wide range, like so, top to bottom as well, all right, and right to left. Let me see. Okay, I just want to make this a little bit darker again, so I'm going to go do it a few times. Okay, something like this. So you see here that I've lighted those trees without needing to create selections of those trees. Okay. So that is really very easy. You can also do this in a different kind of way. So I'm going to create a new layer, like so, and then do the following. You grab your lasso tool, for example, and you say, okay, I want to do something with those lighter trees. So let me just roughly indicate those trees, like so. All right. Then I'm going to load the lights 225, intersect it with selection. All right. And then go to, of course, to tools. And now you turn on auto blending. Okay. So it will automatically do the correction. It will automatically do the restore, but it takes more time. And on top of that, it will also bleed into the adjacent areas. Okay, that's why I prefer to use a rectangular marquee tool with the restore, because it gives you more control. But sometimes the adjustments with the rectangular marquee tool are not useful, or especially with, let's say, amorphous kind of shapes. So then you have to use a lasso tool, and then you can do this and turn the auto blending on. So let me do a few of those iterations. You see that it takes more time because in the background, it does an automatic restore and a feathering and all those things at the same time. And by the way, this is also one of the reasons that I developed this panel, because the thing is, if you look, for example, at SilverFX Pro, I mean, it's still the same kind of principle as 30 years ago when I was their global ambassador. If you want to adjust something locally, you have to add those viewpoints, and then it will affect the entire area and will bleed over. There's no control. And I always, yeah, you know, it was great for back then, but it surprises me that they still haven't evolved that specific feature just yet. And this gives me much more control, because now I can select an area without adding viewpoints or that kind of stuff, and be able to control that specific area to a much greater extent than with the SilverFX Pro features. And don't get me wrong, I like SilverFX Pro. I mean, I was their global ambassador, but they haven't grown over the past decade. You know, they haven't changed anything. And That's a shame, of course. But you see here, it takes more time to do this with the auto blending, so you have to make it a little bit strong. So let me do that again. And keep in mind, I'm doing this webinar with Zoom in the background, so my computer is already a little bit slower now. So keep that in mind. All right. But I hope that you see that. You see that? The trees are lighter, and you don't need to do a restore in this case. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit. Before, after. Okay, I selected too much here, but there's also a little bit of bleeding over the edge, the virtual edge that you see here. And that's necessary, else you cannot come up with a seamless transition from adjusted area to the areas that are not adjusted. So there's always a trade-off. But I preferred this one with the rectangular marquee tool, even though it follows a specific unnatural shape for the trees. I mean, it follows the rectangle instead of the specific shape of the trees. Still, it gives me more control. So this is done with the rectangular marquee tool, and this is done with the auto blending. So it requires more iterations, and you don't need to do the restore, and it's more natural, but I prefer this one. Okay. All right, so I can do so much more with this photograph, but there's just not enough time. So I just suggest to go to the break. But before we do that, I just want to give you the opportunity to ask questions if there are any questions for now.
Yes, Joe. Can you
Hello.
Can you understand me?
I can hear you. I can understand you as well. Yeah.
It's Martin speaking from the Netherlands.
Hello, Martin. Okay, Martin, please go ahead.
In this photograph, you only lightened up a small part of the lake.
Yeah.
But suppose you have a similar photograph and you want to lighten up the whole lake for a certain purpose. Is it still possible with the rectangular marquee tool and the restore function, or is it more appropriate with the lasso tool because of the shape of the lake?
Well, you can still do that with the lasso, with the restore, with the rectangle, you know. But there's also this one. Okay, so adjustments. Then you have the advanced adjustments. Okay, what you do then is just to do this, select roughly the shape of the lake, something like this. Okay, it's not very accurate, but it's just for the idea.
Yeah.
And then you go here with the smart linear or the smart linear strict. Okay. This is a more seamless transition, it's more natural. Well, this is a little bit harder, which is better for, let's say, architecture, but let's say that you use this, lighten. Okay, you see that the lake has been lightened without needing to restore it. You see that?
Yeah.
Before, after. So you can also use that. Well, the thing is, I didn't explain this because this has been explained in other webinars, but still very useful if you want to just quickly lighten it up without doing too many, let's say, complicated steps. So this is also a very good way of lightening or darkening things. And that's why I built this panel, to be able to control specific areas in your photo locally.
No, that's correct.
And that's why I basically created this panel. Yep.
Thanks for your answer, Joel.
Not a problem. Anyone else who has a question?
Joel.
Yes, Mike.
This is Mike. Martin had another question, and I probably the rest of the people would like to know also. Do you remember which of your webinars has the full copy of your presentation deck?
You mean of this thing?
Yes. Which webinar
Uh,
did we cover this in?
I don't know. I've done so many webinars that, I don't keep track of that. So off the top of my head, I really don't know. So I have to look it up. Okay. I'm not sure if I explained this in one of the free webinars. Maybe it's one of the paid webinars that obviously are not on YouTube. But I think it's also in one of the free webinars that are on YouTube. So let me check that later on. Right now, I don't know it, but I've covered it many times in various webinars. Okay, so I'll get back to that later on, Mike.
I think it was in your fine art workshop. That was at least
Oh,
one of them.
that is possible. I mean, I've done so many of those webinars that I really cannot remember which one it was.
And that fine art workshop is available online?
If it's one of the free webinars, then it's available online. Yeah. Else, it's only available to the ones who paid for it. But let me check it first, because I really don't know if I've also used that specific presentation in a different kind of free webinar. So let me please check that first, Mike.
Okay.
Yep. And I'll get back to that later.
Hello.
All right. Yes. Hello. Yes. I hear
Yes,
you.
my name is John Jr. And
Hello, John Jr.
okay, hey, you got some awesome work. I'd like to know when you may come back to Chicago.
Oh, I would love to come back as soon as possible because it's a fantastic city. So let's say somewhere next year. I promise, okay? Because I need to go back to Chicago.
Oh, okay.
By the way, you're John Evans, right? Or not?
Yes.
Okay, okay. That's why you asked about Chicago. I know you. I've seen you on the Instagram and I think or Facebook,
Oh,
or
thank you.
whatever it
Thank you.
was.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And my other question is, have you ever done a seminar or webinar when you go out and photograph with your camera gear and everything, how you set up and your settings?
No, I've never done that because it's quite complicated to do that live, while I'm being out on the streets. So for that, I have some video tutorials, some paid video tutorials, in which I'm being followed on the streets. But apart from that, the thing is that this is something that I can only usefully do in a real life kind of workshop on location. But not. I've never done a webinar on that. No, it's basically because it's technically quite a challenge to do that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Not a problem.